You're thrilled about that reading, right? Do you think some explanation is important in this regard? Just think if you followed Scripture literally, I wouldn't end up with much of a parish. Yeah, half of them would be blind, some of their tongues pulled out. I'll get to that point because we're talking about hyperbole. You know what hyperbole is? It's not a kind of glue. Yes. And even further, it says a gross exaggeration. But we'll get to that. Isn't it interesting that the writers of the gospel would pick out a story where it says there were other people who were preaching and healing people, but they were not with the apostles? There's an important reason for that, because there's always a teaching point. The apostles were sent to the lost people of Israel. What that means is they were sent to people who, amidst the being conquered people, were not following their religion very closely. The place where they prayed is called a synagogue, and many did not go. They were disgusted with the way of life because of the Romans and the quality of the ministers of their word. They questioned. So they fell away. So Jesus sends his apostles to the lost children of Israel. And it's important in this particular reading, Jesus says to his disciples, if these people are already in positive territory, let them go. They're doing okay. Because they're not against us, so they're for us. He's saying to them, you do not have to go and correct anything. They are doing well because they're doing it in my name. Maybe a little different than I taught you, but they're doing it in my name. So he's saying to the apostles, return to your original job, and that is to bring back the lost children of Israel, those who are not attending services, who are not getting any spiritual input. Make sense to you? Now, the part about the cutting your arm off and all this other stuff. When Jesus would teach in a group, there would, of course, be some discussion afterwards. I had the fortune as a missionary to live in a situation not unlike that of Jesus in the time in which he lived. And I know how the process works. So if Jesus came to teach something where Jesus would be focusing on the fact that we have to use the gifts of our body well, like our arms, our eyes, and so forth. And you could hear people begin to grumble and say, well, if I've got to do all that, I might as well just cut it out. Might as well just chop my hand off, pull out my eye, and forget it. I could hear all that kind of grumbling in the village where I lived. People would do that. So Jesus uses this strong message to say to the people, it is important for us as adults to not lead any of our children into sin. That's the point. That's the point of this gospel. And he uses this hyperbole to point out how important it is for us as adults not to lead children into sin, nor to cause children to sin. That's understandable, isn't it? And we as Christian Catholics, and that's why we gather here each Sunday and the other days, to go deeper and deeper into our Christian Catholic faith so that our children, our relatives, and friends can also grow deeper. But there's something really important in the process. We cannot tell another person into the faith space. And I'm at fault at this, starting out as a new priest. You know, I thought my job was to tell people things. I always used to say, the reason I went to the seminary is because I wanted to learn how to tell people where to go. I finally realized that my real purpose is to listen and to respond to the need of the person. That's a very different kind of approach. And that's the approach that is important for us as adults and as Christian Catholics, that we are persons who invite. In the talk that I give in talking about Scripture, I say, Scripture is not a cudgel to beat people with so that they get in line. Scripture is used to give inspiration so that the person chooses to be loving. But we can't tell a person into that space. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Because you know that even if you have small children and you're harping on something, they'll turn you off. Am I not correct? I know they've turned me off a few times. So the manner in which we do this is exceedingly important. So as we talk about important issues, we do it in a way that represents inspiration. We do it in such a way that we're not trying to put somebody down. There's a little joke about the third grade, and the teacher put up these numbers, 2 + 2, 3 and 5, and all that stuff. So she asked John to go up and do the math. So he went up, and 5 and 2 is 7, and 3 and 2 is 5, and 2 and 2 is 4. And sister said, well, that's pretty good. Little Johnny said, the hell of it is, it's perfect. The issue here when we approach other people is to approach in such a way that we don't end up turning them off, and the goal with which we came, presented ourselves to these persons, was to be positive, effective, uplifting. So our manner is exceedingly important, and that's why I continue to teach you about every day choosing to do one loving act at a time. When we have this aspect as a part of our life, we will be respectful, we'll be paying attention to listening to the response of the person to whom we're talking, and we will respect the place where they are. Because Jesus' primary job when he worked with the people at that time, he always met people exactly where they were. He did not expect them to be some other place. When we come with that kind of open attitude, persons are willing to listen to us. But bigger than that, you know this about with your children, they watch everything you do. And if you want to know how you're behaving, just look at your children. And you'll find out lots of things. I don't have any children of my own, but I've been with hundreds of them, and they show it clearly, very clearly, what's happening. Dearest family, 2 things to remember: that others in their walk of faith may not be similar to us, but we should not be persons who try to correct and tell people where to go. But our information that we pass on, if asked for, is offered in an invitational way. You understand about invitation? And it's not one of those, you can go if you want to. You know how we do with others. You can go if you want to. Well, we know what's wanted here. Our invitation has to be clear and direct. When we're that way, people are able to listen to what we say and who we are. Then, to strengthen our ability to not allow children around us, that we lead them to any kind of sin. That we help them know where the spots are that are difficult, troublesome, so that they make good choices. And we do that when we're persons who know how to choose one loving act after another.